Hey, welcome to the new Handy Randy Show. New because we're using this brand new studio here at Green High School. My friend Chuck Lyons is a teacher, and is this great or what? And no more hamsters running the production equipment, no more vacuum tubes, all new great stuff. So we hope you enjoy that part. But we're still going to continue to cover museums, car shows, car stuff in general. And tonight's show is going to be featuring orphan cars. Orphan cars. You don't get it? Me neither. I guess we just go and look. No, I'll tell you what orphan cars are. These are cars that are no longer in production, or the parent company is no longer available. I'll give you some examples. How about the Hudson automobile? Gone. Packard automobile, not around anymore, although there's a lot of those great cars still at car shows. More recently, what about Pontiac? No more. Great automobile. General Motors pulled the plug. Before that, the Oldsmobile, gone. How about Ford Mercury? No more. Sorry, no more. Plymouth, gone. Those are just recent, some of the tragedies that have happened to the automobile industry. And there's other ones like the Studebaker, and just the list goes on and on. So without further ado, why don't we go to beautiful Ypsilanti on the river and see what happens each and every year at the now famous Ypsilanti Orphan Show. Watch.
Pass and review tent, so I am safe in telling you that the show is officially underway. As soon as they make their way up here, we'll introduce you folks to the people that brought these fine automobiles to Ypsilanti today. And the gentleman behind me, Mr. Godshall and Mr. Wagner, will give you folks a running commentary of the cars and tell you the history and the background of each model as they pass through. This man needs no introduction. This is Joe Kelly. Joe Kelly is an old Ypsilanti resident. He's a primary benefactor of the Ypsilanti Automotive Heritage Museum. Joe always works with us in conjunction with the shows every year. And Joe and Suzanne are from Whispering Pines, North Carolina. And this particular car is a 1934 Packard 1104 Coupe Roadster. Welcome back to your hometown there, Joe. This particular Packard, Joe just told me, belonged to movie actress Sonia Henning.
She was also an ice skating star, right? And it looks as if it's a standard, if you wish to call it that, Packard body. It is a Super 8, which was one level down from the very top. Packard also built a V12. The engine is in excess of, I think it's 385 cubic inches, which was rather large. A number of cars in that era, the big straight 8s were 3.5-inch bore by 5-inch stroke, 385 cubic inch straight 8s, around 130 horsepower, I would suspect. Jeff, have you got anything more to add?
Well, you might look at the classic Packard radiator, the so-called yoke-shaped radiator shell. This year V'd in plan view, and also notice that the headlamps and the parking lamps and the fender also have a similar V. This was the most famous face in motoring at one time.
This is a 1934 Packard 1107 Phaeton, and this also belongs to Joe Kelly. And we'll turn it over to the guys real quick, and we'll keep it moving.
Another classic example of Packard styling of the era, very distinctive, rather conservative. Packards were always a bit on the conservative side, but again, you're looking at the time the most famous face in luxury motoring in the United States.
And this one happens to be a V12, Jeff. And you people looking at the cylindrical things hanging on the bumpers, those are actually dampers to control body vibration, which was one of the ways that Packard ensured their limousine ride.
This next car is a 37 Packard Coupe. It belongs to a friend of mine by the name of Chuck George. This is a business coupe, a 120 business coupe. Chuck's very, very proud of this car. He's done a lot of work to this vehicle. He's owned it a number of years. RM Classic Cars just did a recent restoration on this car for Chuck, and they've done a beautiful job. Chuck's a local guy from Ypsi like me, and go ahead, guys, and tell him about it.
Well, the Packard 120 was introduced in 1935 as a means of keeping Packard afloat. Building limousines and special classic type ultra high priced cars was not going to cut it any longer, and Packard conceived the 120 series, which got its name from its 120-inch wheelbase, as a means of survival. And the original ones were straight eights. They came out with a 6-cylinder companion in 1937 that looked about like this car, but just a trifle shorter. 1937 also was the best year Packard ever had in terms of model year sales.
You may be wondering why I have a box of baking soda here on the Handy Randy Car Show. Well, those mechanics out there know that baking soda comes in very handy around the battery from where the battery would charge over, especially those older batteries, and we would use baking soda to clean up the acid from batteries. But more importantly, how about that baking soda that's sitting in the refrigerator? When was the last time your wife removed and rotated the baking soda out of the refrigerator? I know at my house it might be 3 or 4 years, along with some of that other scary stuff way in the back of the refrigerator. Honey, when was the last time you rotated the baking soda? Well, here's a handy randy rule for you right now, is we can know when the baking soda was replaced, because every spring and every fall, I would suggest you take the baking soda out of the refrigerator, put it in a big pail of water, take your car washing stuff, car soap, not the dishwasher stuff under the sink. No. That'll take the wax off. But baking soda and car washing soap, and wash your car with it. Why are we doing that? Because we want to remove the acid that may be sitting on the flat surface of the paint on your car. Where does it come from? Well, tree sap would be the biggest offender, acid rain, bird droppings, anything that's acidic sitting on the flat surface of your car. Baking soda neutralizes that acid. So we're saving the car surface. And here's the key, folks. Your warranty does not cover outside in. So now we know how to rotate that baking soda. Every spring, every fall, wash your car with baking soda. New cars and old, clear coat and enamel, all covered with your baking soda. Now we're going to go back to Ypsilanti and take a look at some classic cars that no doubt have used baking soda to preserve the surface of the cars. Watch.
Next man in this vehicle here really needs no introduction to anybody that's involved in automobiles. Bob Stevens and his wife Dahlia come and help us with this show every year. And this particular Packard's a 1940 Packard Coupe. And Bob and Dahlia are out of Sydney, Ohio. And before Bob moves this car, every year we honor someone who we call is a friend of the Orphan Car. And this year, Bob Stevens is that man. Bob Stevens is editor-at-large for Amos Publishing Company. They produce about 5 different automobile periodicals. For 23 years, Bob was editor of Cars and Parts magazine. Many of you have probably read Bob's articles and seen Bob's pictures, because when Bob's at a car show, he's always got a notepad in his hand and a camera in his other hand. So I'm going to have Jack Miller read to you folks what's on this plaque, and we're going to present this to Bob right now.
Good morning.
It says,
friend of Orphan Cars, presented by the Ypsilanti Automotive Heritage Collection and the Ypsilanti Orphan Car Show, to Robert J. Bob Stevens, June 1st, 2003. Born and raised in Detroit, Bob Stevens is labeled the ultimate car guy, as his interest in automobiles was created by his mother, who worked for the Packard Motor Car Company. Bob's automotive journalism career began as a junior staff writer for Automotive News, the leading trade paper of the industry. Later, he would write for Auto Design and Engineering and the Chevrolet division's in-house publications. During 1979, Bob accepted the editorial position of Cars and Parts, a magazine dedicated to the automotive hobby. Bob was instrumental in launching Cars and Parts' sister publication, Cars and Parts Corvette. Today, Bob serves as editor-at-large for the 5 automotive hobby publications that are produced by Amos Publishing of Sydney, Ohio, the parent magazine parent publisher to Cars and Parts. Bob's collection of gas-powered vehicles extends today to include motorcycles. As a friend of Orphan Cars, Bob Stevens' love of Orphan Cars has promoted the automotive collecting hobby. Congratulations.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. This is a real honor. I follow 2 other gentlemen who I know. Ken Mack, who received this award last year, a talented Chrysler engineer, is now retired, and an old friend, John Conde, who won the first Friend of the Orphan Car Show award 2 years ago, was a retired publicist for American Motors Corporation, and I once bought a car from John Conde, a 2-seater AMX, way back when I was a lot younger. And I'd just like to say Cars and Parts has had a long association with the Orphan Cars as a so-called independents, and we probably feature more Orphan Cars in our magazine than anybody else does. I'm kind of proud of that, because I've owned about a dozen Orphan Cars myself over the year, and I have 3 of them right now. 2 of them are here today, and my 69 AMX is over there, and my 40 Packard, which we call our Packard Louise after my mother, who worked for Packard from 36 to 43, and left Packard in 43 to start a family, and I came along 18 months later. And so I've been kind of an Orphan Car guy since before I was born, really. I'd really like to thank the Orphan Car Show Committee, and especially my friend Jack Miller here for this award. I really appreciate it. And have a good day. Enjoy the beautiful sunshine and all these rare, interesting cars out here. This is one of the most interesting shows I cover each year, and I cover about 40 shows every year from Hershey. I just got back yesterday from California covering a show out there. Got in the wee hours of the morning here and drove up from Dayton, Ohio. Drove the Packard up in my AMX. They both ran flawlessly too, fortunately. You never know with an old car, she might not even start, and I want to get back in it, but so far she's running real well. Once again, thank you very much, and enjoy the day, and enjoy all these fine cars and trucks out here. Jack, thank you very much, my friend.
This particular one's a 37 Packard Touring Coupe. This is Bill Jesse from New Boston, Michigan. Welcome, Bill. This next one's a 39 Packard Club Coupe. This is Doug and Barbara McIntosh from Beverly Hills, Michigan. Welcome. This last one is a 1940 four-door touring sedan. This is Jack Olson from Novi, Michigan. Gentlemen.
Again, with these Packards, you can see the evolution of the vertical Packard grille, how it's getting narrower and slimmer with the 1940 model. Even though this is one of the most famous faces in motoring, it gave Packard a problem, as we'll see in the next group of cars, because their design theme was tied to a vertical radiator shell, a vertical grille, at a time when car design was going horizontal. It's something that Cadillac converted to, a so-called tombstone horizontal grille in 1941, and Packard was left to deal with how to take their vertical grille into the modern era, and that was one of the problems for them stylistically. The Packard here in front of us is the so-called bathtub Packard. You can see that everybody was going to the so-called envelope body after the war. Everybody handled it differently. Kaiser Frazer handled it one way, Ford another way, Mercury another way, Nash with its covered wheels another way. This was Packard's version. It has not remained a very popular vehicle from a style standpoint in later years, but these vehicles were very modern during the time.
Hey, welcome back to Handy Randy. We'll talk to you about a real serious issue, especially cars that are older than, say, 24 years ago. So starting in about 1989 or 90, most cars went to a different configuration on the lifters. But pre-89 pushrod cars have a real issue on lubrication. The reason for that is the modern oils have reduced, because of EPA issues, have reduced the amount of sulfur in the oil. Sulfur is a very, very important lubricant to pre-89 vehicles. You following me on this? So all the modern oils, great oils, synthetics, synthetic blends, all of the great modern oils, important and great for new cars. But for old cars, not so good. And here's why. Because of the lack of sulfur, the camshaft will wear out on your nostalgia car. You have to get an oil that is high content of sulfur. So either a diesel oil, or my personal favorite is Brad Penn. This is the old Kindle GT racing oil. And you can go online, and don't take my word for it, go online and find out for yourself. You need to buy an oil that has high sulfur content for your nostalgia car, unless you've got a roller cam in it. Go online, take a look at Brad Penn. There's distributors throughout the area that sell this product, and it is an absolutely a necessity to your old custom car. It's called Brad Penn. There's others out there, and then there's like Z+. There are sulfur and zinc products out there that you can pour into your oil. But again, it's the low sulfur. Diesel engines now have it. And again, even more as important to the sulfur is the zinc additive that's needed for your old car, okay? That's a Handy Randy lesson number 622. But how about less of me and more of old cars? I knew you'd say that. Let's go back up to Ypsilanti and more of the Orphan Show. Watch.
And in fact, that was, I believe, 1949 was Packard's largest year after World War I. World War II, isn't that right, Jim?
That's right, second only to 1937.
We finally got her running, boys. Let's see what we got here. This is a 46, guys. It's a four-door touring sedan. This is Ben and Jean Harwood from New Boston, Michigan.
Deluxe Clipper model, according to the script on the side.
This one's a 48 Packard Super 8. This is a four-door sedan. This is George Foley from Troy, Michigan. Go ahead, move ahead, sir. Go ahead.
Yeah, the 46 Clipper there, you can see the fender fading into the door. That was quite advanced for mid-1941. It was a style designed by Howard Darren, an independent automotive designer. And the problem was that the design, while it was very advanced, came in the middle of 1941, and because of the early end of production for 1942 cars in January, Packard really wasn't able to capitalize on that quite good-looking car and modernization of the Packard theme.
This is a 48 Packard Custom 8. This is Alan Sugat from Ann Arbor, Michigan. And for those of you that are interested in a Packard, this happens to be for sale. It's a 59,000-mile original car for $8,000. This is an Orphan Car Show committee member. Dan, pronounce your last name for me.
Beam.
This is Dan Beam from New Boston, Michigan. Dan is one of the several army of volunteers that work with us starting in September to put the show together every year. Go ahead and move ahead, Dan. This is a 49 Packard. This is a four-door sedan. This is John Porter from St. Clair, Michigan.
And I understand this is an original, unrestored car. Is that right? something we really like to see at any car show, an original unrestored car. That, including the paint, sir? It's been partially repainted. Okay.
And you'll notice this car is slightly different than the other 49. This is the golden anniversary model. Came out in May of that year. It has a different body side molding and has larger chrome housed headlamps, or tail lamps.
This is a 50. This is a four-door Deluxe 8. This is Mark and Rhonda Gelstein from White Lake, Michigan.
It looks like a 49. Well, Packards were actually sold by series number rather than model year, although they had to title them by years, but Packard numbered them starting with the original straight 8s in 1924.
This first one's a 53 Packard Clipper, two-door Sportster. This is Leonard Gregory from Lambertville.
The Packard Sportster was kind of an interim model. They only built it 2 years in 53 and 54, the end of the straight 8 series. And they already had come out with a hardtop, but there was still a very conservative element within Packard, and so they decided to do something some of the other manufacturers had done, and that was take their two-door sedan and trim it up with a very deluxe interior, which was a full vinyl interior and very wearable, but also very sharp. So they kind of sharpened up a lower-priced car and found a very limited market, but at that time they were striving to regain marketplace, and this was relatively a good success in getting people into the showroom.
This next one, Bill, is a 51 Packard 200. This is a four-door deluxe sedan. This is Bill O'Grady from Carrollton, Michigan. And this beautiful convertible is a 53, absolutely gorgeous. This is a Matador Maroon Packard Caribbean, and this is owned by P.N. Hayden from Ann Arbor, Michigan. Dr. Hayden's been here many, many times over the years for the Orphan Car Show, a very big supporter of our show, and we appreciate it.
Yeah, the Packard Caribbean was, there was a spate of sort of specialty cars being introduced in 1953 and 54. The Chevrolet Corvette, the Buick Skylark, the Cadillac Eldorado, the Oldsmobile Fiesta, the Kaiser Darren, other cars like that. This was Packard's version of an ultra luxury convertible. They only built 750 of these vehicles. It was sort of roughly patterned after the Packard Pan American show vehicle, which was designed by Richard Arbib. And this was an attempt by Packard to do a very glamorous convertible, and you can see the very clean body sides. You can see the chrome trimmed full wheel openings, unlike the 54. And up front, you can see the what remains of the Packard yoke radiator grille, how they attempted to keep the hallmark of the yoke radiator grille, but still adapted to modern design.
Hey, welcome back to the Handy Randy Show. Hope you're enjoying the nostalgia and antique automobiles. I have another boring tip for you. Well, it's important, okay? You need to know about this stuff. And I'm just a person to talk about it. Today's subject is brake fluid. Now, brake fluid, well, let me tell you, it's pretty important on today's modern automobiles with the anti-lock braking and all the hydraulic stuff that's going on in the master cylinder, expensive stuff. About every 3 years or so, when you have a brake job done or service, you should flush the brake fluid out. Yes, you should. Just like changing the oil, changing the brake fluid is important because brake fluid is, it's a pretty big randy word, hygrosopic. Pretty big word for me, isn't it? With my Howard education. Hygrosopic means it absorbs moisture. And over a period of time, moisture in your brake fluid is taboo, bad stuff, because it will contaminate the master cylinder, the ABS system, and also the entire brake system. By changing out the brake fluid, you will get rid of the old contaminated moisture brake fluid and put new good brake fluid in it. Also, each year that the brake fluid is in your car, you lose about 10% of the boiling point. New brake fluid boils at 284 degrees Fahrenheit. When it gets contaminated with fluid, that boiling point goes down. And if you're in a high heat braking situation on the mountains in West Virginia, you need that good high boiling point. So about every 3 years, when you go to the shop, ask the shop foreman or technician, say, please flush my brake fluid. It's a matter of, in some cases, could be life and death, okay? Another handy-randy tip, and I know, less about me and more about cars. And I know you would love to go back for one more session of the Ypsilanti Orphan Show. So let's go to Michigan right now.
This is a 56 Packard 400 two-door hardtop. This is Doug and Karen Markham from Livonia, Michigan.
This was the last of the big Packards, the big Detroit-built Packards, the production of which ended in June of 1956. This car was designed by Dick Teague, who later went on to be Vice President of Design for American Motors. This is the Packard that has the big V8 introduced in 1955 and the torsion bar suspension, the cathedral tail lights that Dick Teague sketched up over Easter weekend in 1954 to get them on the 55 car. Packard made a real valiant effort in 1955 and 1956 to pull equal to Lincoln and Cadillac and Imperial, but unfortunately they ran out of money and the great Packard engineering staff was disbanded, many of them going to Ford.
This one here is a 58 Packard Hawk, two-door hardtop. This is Don Berg from Platteville, Wisconsin.
When Studebaker and Packard merged in 1954, again the company got into trouble. There was a deal with the Curtis Wright Company in the summer of 1956 that rescued Studebaker Packard, but at the price of ending Packard production in Detroit. So Packards were built in South Bend on Studebaker chassis during 1957 and 58. There was a man named Roy Hurley who was president of Curtis Wright, and he persuaded the Studebaker Packard styling staff to make up a car for him, and this car later went into production as the Packard Hawk. It's a variation of the famous Studebaker Hawk, and of course this is roughly the same body as was used on the 1953 Studebakers. The Packard Hawks are very rare, and we're really privileged to see one here today.
Okay, this is a 1925 Oakland. This is a Landau Coupe. This is Gary McIntyre from Brighton, Michigan, and we are now in our second classifications of cars, which are orphans of the big three. Gentlemen,
the Oakland Company was one of the original companies of General Motors when it was founded, put together by William C. Durant in 1908. Oakland in 1926 introduced a companion car called the Pontiac, which quickly became a much more favored car by the buying public than the Oakland, and the Oakland was discontinued after the 1931 models.
this is a beauty. This is a 1940, and this is a convertible Packard. This is Howard and Norma Weaver.
The LaSalle, of course, was a very lovely car. This is the last of the series in 1940. There was a 1941 model planned, and it was some wood models, wood mock-ups were made, but Cadillac at the last minute decided not to continue with the LaSalle and come out with a lower-priced Cadillac in 1941, which was, from a marketing standpoint, the right thing to do because Cadillac sales just about doubled in 1941.
This is a 57 Monarch Turnpike Cruiser, which of course very similarly resembles the Mercury Turnpike Cruiser here in America. This is Harry Robertson from Richmond, British Columbia, and I understand you're going to have this car at the Ford 100th anniversary celebration.